Hi there, let's talk about your research protocol. Now, in this discussion, we will be focused on the contents, form, style, and tips. Hopefully, you'll be able to get some tips as to how you'll be able to structure your academic output in such a way that it will lead to a scholarly output and that it will help you prepare to become researchers in the future. Why are we learning this? And why do we need to learn this? Basically, the reason is that research is a process, and as a process, it has several steps that needs to be followed, and these steps need to be reflected on your manuscript. Next, research is scholarly. When we say scholarly, it's an output of scholars, it's an output of intellectuals, it's an output that has undergone rigorous process. It's an output that is evaluated for the purpose of academic presentation, academic integrity, and not only for that, but basically for the purpose of improving knowledge and the practices that we have in our setting. So without documenting your research properly, without making an adequate proposal and a scholarly proposal, we will not be able to pursue in your research project. Hence, we need this discussion on your research protocol. Now, I would like to declare the following, that I am a graduate of this university in my Bachelor of Science in Nursing and then in Master of Arts in Nursing. I specialize in medical surgical nursing by education and nursing administration by education and practice. I have members of the organization indicated on the slide, including the Society for Simulation in Healthcare, the Sigma Theta Tau, the International Organization for Nursing, Philippine Society for Quality in Healthcare, Royal Institute, Singapore, your Alumni Association for Central Philippine University, the Critical Care Nurses Association of the Philippines, Philippine Nurses Association, Association of Nursing Service Administrators of the Philippines, and the Philippine Nursing Research Society Incorporated. Other than that, I would like to declare that there is no conflict of interest. The presenter is currently working as a nurse educator or clinical instructor, and the examples indicated in the slides are from APA and from the master's thesis of yours truly. This is only intended as a guide, only a guide for the learner's pursuit of research. This is not intended to be the only guide. This shall be used as supplementary to the textbooks and advice of your respective teachers, advisees, and panel members. Advisors, and panel members. So I hope that from this presentation, you'll be able to grasp something to improve your presentation. Now, let's talk about the document. Size. Your document size should be in letter. In other words, that should be 8.5 inches by 11 inches. Substance. When I talk about substance, that would be the quality of the bond paper that you will be using. So commonly, we're using substance 20 and above. Okay, that means that it's a thicker bond paper than the usual that you will be seeing in the market. So it should be substance 20 and above. So usually, it's substance 20 to 24. Margins, since we are working on hardbound output as Bachelor of Science in Nursing students, you need to have a margin of 1.5 inches on the left, and then that would be 1 inch on the other side. Spacing. Your spacing, should be double spaced for the entire document. Font style would depend on the institution or organization where you are working. Usually, it would be Times New Roman 12 or Arial 11. These are the common font styles and size used for scholarly outputs. Alignment. The document is centered when it comes to the major titles and major headings. However, it is left aligned for the rest of the document. It is not justified, it is left aligned. This is an example of an output that would show the proper margin and then the pagination that will be discussed later on. Now, page number. For your page number, the page number is located on the upper right-hand corner of the page unless otherwise specified. And then the page number is not indicated on the first page of each chapter. As you can see in this example, there is no page number. This is supposedly the page 1 already of your research. So it's not numbered. But look at page 2. This is the next page, so it's already numbered as 2. So all the first pages of the chapters are not numbered. The caption of the images are written below the image. The caption of the diagram are written below the diagram, but the caption or title of the table is written above the table. Let's talk about your title page. The title page should contain the following: title, then the author or authors, and then the institution where you are belonging. Then for the title of your research, it should be centered and it should be in inverted pyramid format. Now, when we talk about an inverted pyramid format, it means that your title should be situated like this. Okay, it's like an inverted triangle wherein the longer line above, then the second line is shorter, and the third line is shortest. We are usually working on the 20-word limit when it comes to our title. But make sure that your title will be able to capture your problem so that later on, if you will be publishing your research, you will be able to grasp or capture the intended audience by just having your title. And then your title is usually written in all caps. Now, let's talk about your quantitative research. There is a specific discussion on qualitative research, and I will be discussing the contents of quantitative research and research in general in this chapter or in this discussion. Let's talk about your chapter 1. Chapter 1 is introduction. Your introduction would contain the following contents: the background. Other institutions would call it background and rationale of the study. Then you have statement of the problem. For other institutions, it's referred to as objectives of the study. Then you have your hypothesis of the study. It's hypothesis with an E if you are referring to several hypotheses. However, if it is just a single hypothesis, then it should be hypothesis with an I. Then you have your theoretical framework and conceptual framework. For other institutions, they would say theoretical and conceptual framework of the study. Then you will have definition of terms. For others, that would be operational definition of terms. Then you have your significance and then scope and limitations. For others, they are using the term delimitations. So scope and limitations is just synonymous to delimitations. So do not say scope and delimitations of the study, because delimitations is already synonymous to scope and limitations. That's why you only say scope and limitations or delimitations of the study. Now, let's go over them one by one for you to get a picture of what you're supposed to write in these parts of your document. Background. When I talk about the background of the study, it should be able to capture what is, what should be, what is the gap or discrepancy, and what has been done. The intent of your background and rationale of the study, or simply the background of your study, is to make the reader understand why did you conduct this research, or why are you planning to conduct this research. If you are presenting this in an undergraduate defense, your background and rationale will be the reason for your problem to be approved or disapproved. In other words, your background and rationale should be able to make the reader, the evaluator, feel that, alright, there's a problem, and this problem needs to be studied, this problem needs to be explored. That's why your background should be substantial enough to be able to build the stand that indeed your study is necessary and beneficial for our profession. If you are presenting your studies for funding, the possible investors or the possible sources of funds for your research will be evaluating the necessity of their budget funding based on your background and rationale of the study. Now, let's go to what is. When I am talking about what is, it is best to be situated in 3 levels, or best to be discussed in 3 levels. What are these 3 levels? You have your national, you have your, let's start with global, national, and local. Again, that should be global, national, and local. In other words, if you would want to present a problem, let's say for example, there's a problem about breastfeeding, you need to talk about the problem in a global context. What's the problem about breastfeeding? what's happening about breastfeeding in countries abroad, in United States, for example, in Canada, what's happening. Okay, before you go towards the part that pertains to Asia, or before you go towards Southeast Asian countries. Then after the global situation, should be able to present the national situation. So what is happening here in the Philippines? What's the picture here in the Philippines about breastfeeding? Okay. Then after that, you need to present the local situation. Where will you be conducting this research? What is the problem when it comes to breastfeeding in the area where you intend to conduct this research? Okay? So, when we are discussing about breastfeeding, we do not only just focus on talking about breastfeeding, but you need to be able to narrow down on what specific area of breastfeeding are you trying to assess. What specific area about breastfeeding do you find that there's a problem? So you need to be able to discuss that again from the global, national, and local perspective. Then you need to present what should be. Okay? What's the ideal situation? Okay? What's DOH talking about this? What's WHO saying about this? What are the Millennium Development Goals telling about this? What are the literatures telling about this? Or what should be the ideal situation wherein we should be? Then, what do you think is the discrepancy? What do you think were the problems identified in other countries that have led to this problem that you are trying to present? And then what has been done? If there is something that has been done about this, what's the effect? Or what's the effect of this intervention that were done? Discussing the what is, what should be, what is the gap or discrepancy, and what has been done will be able to guide the researchers and also the readers and the evaluators as to why your problem is actually necessary. And for that reason, you need to be working on this outline. Now, you don't need to place the words what is, what should be, what is the gap, what has been done when you're making your background of the study. Okay? They won't be appearing there, but usually they will be separated in paragraphs. Now, when we talk about paragraphs in a research pursuit and any academic inquiry or academic output, your paragraph ideally should not be extending beyond a single page. A paragraph that is extending beyond a single page is a very long idea that you're trying to present. Okay, so try to apply what you have learned from your English classes and try to cluster your paragraph in such a way that you are presenting a main idea and supporting ideas within the paragraph before you move towards the next paragraph. In the making of your background, please also be accustomed on using your citations. A scholarly output would include citations because it is the citations which will be telling us what is known about your research, what is known about this study that we're trying to pursue, and what can we do about those things that were already known. Or what can we improve about those things that were already known. Or if there's none known about your topic, what is being said by the literatures available to us. Okay? So you need citations because the more the citations, the more scholarly an output is. Although this is not a strict guide, usually would be telling our learners that in a paragraph of a background and rationale should be able to include at least 1 or 2 citations. Okay? Because it would not be that the entire idea there is just your idea on your own, especially if you're just starting on your research. Next, these are examples of citation. This is an example from the Manual of APA, American Psychiatric Association. And by the way, we are following APA for your research output. So as you can see, there are citations. Bressler and Balshine, for example, 2006, Erlewine, 2010, and then these authors. This means that this idea that talks about humor is being supported by these 3 articles. Okay? So as you can see, this idea is supported by this article. Okay, and then this one states how a review is being done. Now, another example would be, this is how a reference list would be done. In other words, once you're already making your background and rationale of the study, you need to be particular that you should already be making also the reference list. So that is how it will be entered in your reference list. However, if you will be doing the citation at the end of your sentence, this is how it would look like, and then a dot here. And then if it will be a narrative citation, it will look like this. To give you more example, allow me to proceed to the next slide. Okay? As you can see, this is an example of an in-text citation wherein you're using the parenthesis outside other parenthesis for the dates. So as you can see, the last name, the year the article was made, has blah blah blah. And then this one is citation. Usually, if you have already cited the last name here, you don't need to cite it here at the end of the sentence. Unless that you have had several ideas presented, and then that would have them also as references. However, if this is a single sentence or two, you do not need to repeat color 2016 at the end of the first sentence or the second sentence, unless you have inserted other ideas from other authors. Now, this is an example from my personal endeavor. So, as you can see, it is already indicated that these are my references. This is the author of this reference or the origin of this idea. And then this is the approaches. This is the author also of this idea. Ideally, we are advocating that you should be using references which are 5 years recent. In other words, if you are conducting your study in 2020, your references should be from 2015 to 2020. If you're conducting your study in 2022 or you're making your proposal in 2022, your references should ideally be from 2017 to 2022. But there are exceptions to that rule. For example, if there are no researches within the time frame, you need to indicate it somewhere in your background and rationale. And that could help us rationalize why do you need to conduct this research. So for example, I can go in the line of stating that since there are no studies conducted within the past 5 to 10 years about this topic, we find this topic to be interesting for the conduct of our research. Okay? That could be a good rationalization on the part of your study. When you are making your background and rationale, one thing that you need to remember is that it should be scholarly. It's not supposed to be plagiarized. It's supposed to include citations. And then it should be free from grammatical errors. Okay, that's why it always helps if you will have a second eye, if you'll have the entire group to check on your grammar, semantics, form, and style. Then, the next part is the statement of the problem, or as others would call it, the objectives of the study. So, in the statement of the problem, it is usually divided into two main parts. That would be the general objective and then the specific objective. Usually, it is stated in the statement format, but there are institutions that would have it in a question format. So regardless, if you are familiar with the statement format, it's very easy to transition to a question format. So for the purpose of this discussion, I'll be discussing on the statement format. Now, I mentioned that there are two main components, the general objective and then the specific objectives. The general objective is usually the restatement of the title. The general objective is usually the restatement of the title. For example, in this research, the title of the study is Factors Associated with the Quality of Life Among Children with Epilepsy in Iloilo City. Now, as you can notice, the general objective is stated as this study primarily aims to determine the factors associated with the quality of life among children with epilepsy in Iloilo City as perceived by their parents. And specifically, this study further aims to. Okay? If you can notice, the tense already of the verb that is indicated here is in the past tense because this is already a final manuscript. Be mindful that if you are making a proposal should be in a future tense. So you would usually say, the purpose of conducting this study is to, or this study will be conducted to, so you would usually press a future tense to indicate that this is a proposal and the study is not yet done. In the finalization of your output, once you are done conducting already your study, it should already be stated in past tense. Okay, so as you can notice, I would like to emphasize that the purpose of this study, or the purpose is that it should be stated in future tense because you are working on a proposal. Now, one thing that I have emphasized also in this slide is your paradigm of variables. The paradigm of variables is a signal or a reminder to you that they should be congruent to one another, especially if you are pursuing your descriptive comparative and your descriptive correlational study. Okay? So you would need to be able to cite all the variables indicated in your paradigm of variables, also the relationship that you need to explore. So, for example, in this research, as you can see, the first objective would be describe the characteristics of the children with epilepsy in terms of age. It's pertaining to the first variable here. Determine the parents' level of knowledge about epilepsy. It's referring to the second variable here. Determine their adherence to medication regimen or treatment. Adherence to treatment, that's the third variable here. And determine the quality of life of children with epilepsy. That's the fourth variable. Then determine if there is a significant relationship between the characteristics and then the knowledge about epilepsy, and then between the characteristics and adherence towards treatment, then between the characteristics, quality of life, the knowledge and quality of life, adherence and quality of life. So if I will be the evaluator of your research, or others will be doing that, we need to check if the paradigm of the variables is matching on the objectives of your study. That's why when we were discussing research, we are always emphasizing that you need to be clear as to what do you want to attain in your research, in such a way that we will be able to clearly define the variables and that we will be able to clearly state the objectives of your research. The use of arrows tend to be institutional when it comes to research. There are organizations or institutions that would not instruct the student not to use the arrowheads because the arrowheads are indicating relationship already. But there are institutions that advocate for the use of the arrowheads because for them they would want to test the relationship or difference as caused by the other variable. So it would depend on your institution. Now, that would also depend in your study whether you will be having antecedent, independent, dependent, and even intervening variable between the independent and dependent variable. It is not a constant that all studies would contain antecedent, independent, intervening, and dependent. That would be dependent actually on the review of literatures that you will be having. So that would depend on the conceptual framework also of your study. Now you'll have the hypothesis of the study. Basically, for the hypothesis could be said as a restatement of the objectives of your study. However, we are only using the objectives of the study wherein we are testing for differences and relationship. Okay, we are only, again, using the objectives of the study wherein we are testing for differences and relationship. So, for example, in this research, there are about 9 to 10 objectives. We are pulling out here. We have 4 hypotheses. We are not using the first objectives there because they were purely descriptive. As you can notice, the first objective would say, describe the characteristics of the children with epilepsy. Then describe the knowledge, describe the adherence, and then describe the quality of life. These types of objectives could not be translated into a hypothesis because this does not entail hypothesis testing. However, if the objective says that this study aims to determine whether there is a significant relationship between variable A and variable B, that the same objective could be converted to your hypothesis. Now, in a hypothesis, there are 2 types of hypothesis as we have discussed. You have your null hypothesis and then your alternative hypothesis. So your null hypothesis is the hypothesis of no difference, the hypothesis of no relationship. This is what we commonly use in your research. There are other researchers who would use alternative hypothesis and would argue that this is the hypothesis that they would want to prove. Okay, but usually in academic, especially undergraduate, we are using your null hypothesis because this is the hypothesis that we would want to reject. So it's usually stated as there is no significant relationship between the variable A, variable B. Or you can say that there is no significant difference on the knowledge about epilepsy when the respondents are categorized according to their characteristics, including your age, sex, civil status, etc. So it would depend on the type of the research, whether it will be a comparative research or a relational research. Okay, so consider that when you are making your hypothesis. And if you are making a proposal, the following will be the hypothesis, or the following hypothesis will be tested in this study. Okay, take note, it should be in the future tense. Now, in the succeeding discussion, we'll be talking about your theoretical and conceptual framework, which is still part of your chapter 1. Guys, thank you very much for your kind attention.